Okay, I'd like to get started. Mrs. Fields has an emergency, so we're going to switch things up just a little bit. What I'd like to do is first of all have comments and reports from the board members, and then we'll move on to Superintendent Byrd's part of the agenda, and then when Mrs. Fields is back, we'll go back and we'll review the agenda for the day. If that's okay with everybody. So, do we have any comments or reports from board members? Well, actually, I have a couple. And I wanted to share this because I know Mr. Townsend asked about this. I want to make sure that he was here when I gave this report. And as I mentioned in our last work session, the World Class Group did agree to pay for the survey, the climate survey, and I know that at the time they had held a non-binding vote. Since then, as I understand it, they have conducted their binding vote and have been in touch with Superintendent Byrd. And Mrs. Byrd, would you like to update us on that? Do we have a timeline?
The timeline, they actually have just mailed out the check what they got and paid for it. So I'm waiting to hear back from the timeline, Mr. Erickson, on that. Okay. But I did thank them, and that was sent out a week ago. So I will have a timeline to provide to the board about it, but they're going to start as soon as possible. When I talked to them, they had just mailed out the check.
Okay. So that's good news. They did mail out the check. I did
Yes,
talk
they
to
did.
Mr. Barcelo. He's anxious to get started,
Mm-hmm.
and he understands the importance of this. And I think he'll do a good job in advising us once that survey is conducted and complete. The other thing I wanted to report was that you might recall that when we were talking about the issue with McLaughlin, that we agreed to have regular meetings with them. We had our first meeting. It was myself, Mr. Small, Donna Drisdom, the new principal at McLaughlin, Donna Dunson, the principal from Lake Wales High School, and Superintendent Jackson from the Lake Wales Charter School system. Exceptionally productive meeting. I think it went very well. There was agreement on all sides to work together. I was especially impressed with the Lake Wales Charter School District and Mrs. Dunson's offer to send high school teachers over to help out at McLaughlin with some of their programs. Did I understand that correctly, Mr. Small? So it was a great meeting. We agreed to obviously continue those meetings and to include some of the leaders in the Lake Wales community. It also included a discussion about how we ensure that those kids get to Lake Wales High School. I know the roll-up thing has always been a concern, and I'm not sure how we overcome that, except there are some practical things we can do, and it was talked about how to ensure that those kids get into Lake Wales High School. So, great discussion, and I would invite Mr. Small to elaborate if you have any thoughts, any additional thoughts.
I'm just reiterating what Mr. Wilson said. I think it was a very productive meeting. I think that there's an open willingness. I think that kind of the ground rules when we set that up is that as a group we would meet together to try to find avenues and opportunities that are best for the children of Lake Wales. And so that's what we're going to operate off of.
Okay. Any questions?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah, it was very good meeting. And that concludes my report. So unless there, Ms. Reynolds, do you have any comments or reports about that? Okay. So, Ms. Burr, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon, and we're going to begin with item 3. We have charter schools. There'll be a slight change. We're going to move item 6 up after the charter school reviews to accommodate a board member. And so we're going to start with Melissa. It's going to come for the charter schools presentation. These are just strictly presentations for you today, not a voting item today.
That's correct. So just to reiterate, the applicants are here, all 4 of them. We received 4 applications today. All 4 representatives are here to present to you highlights and a summary of their application. They'll have 5 minutes to do their presentations, and then you'll have 5 minutes to ask questions. So the first school that's being represented here is Navigator Academy, and I believe Melissa Heidler is here. Yes. Is there someone else coming with you? Yes, we have. Okay, so I'll let Melissa introduce her group, but this is one of the applicants that was here last year, and they withdrew their application, and they're coming back to the table with some revised ideas and information in their application. I am going to set a timer for you. Okay, so if you would just be respectful of the timer, I appreciate it because we all, and as soon as you start, if you'll just hit start, that would be okay. Perfect.
Good morning, my name is Melissa Aguilar, and I'm here representing Navigator Academy of Leadership. A little bit of information regarding our school. Our school's philosophy was built around the change in education. We've come from more of an information age where students who retained the most information earned the highest grades on the exams and were accepted into the best universities and were able to obtain great paying jobs. But now with the digital age, things have shifted. Students are no longer, or information is no longer safeguarded by intellectuals. It's available to anyone and anywhere, especially to students who know how to synthesize, analyze, and apply information. We want our students to have foresight, be problem solvers and critical thinkers, so our curriculum will be establishing that and working with them. Also to develop team building skills, collaboration, and work-proof skills, which is one of the things that we feel that children need nowadays as part of their curriculum program. Navigator Academy is based around the educational philosophy that was established for some of the greatest academic institutions, where the focus is always on the whole child. We believe that our SMART curriculum, which includes instruction in science, math, art, reading, in the form of literature, and technology, will help us prevail and have well-rounded students. We want to give our students a platform where they can be successful, so therefore our exploratory lab model will be essential. In this exploratory lab model, our classrooms will be highly interactive, where students will be active listeners, active participants, and active thinkers. Overall, our motto is that we want our students to be the CEOs of their own learning. We want to develop our students and have them see the importance of their inner gift. Every single child, no matter what their ability or academic achievements are, every single child has an inner gift. So we want to establish this and nurture this and grow this within our children. We want them to understand that their I will is always more important than their IQ. 21st century science and engineering has been a big shift in our educational focus, so we will be incorporating that into our schools. One of the things that we will be looking at is incorporating Project Lead the Way curriculum, Connects, which will introduce basic building and engineering concepts to our primary students, Lego robotics for our older elementary students, which will introduce coding and engineering, and the VEX robotics program, as well as aerospace program for our middle school students. We are currently working with NASA in a partnership. I personally attended, along with my partner, Ivan Hernandez, a 4-day educators NASA workshop, and we did approach them, and we are actually looking at partnering with them to develop professional development opportunities for our teachers and to work directly with our students through NASA engineers. So we're very excited to bring that to Polk County. The Leader in Me is also a huge aspect to our educational program. The Leader in Me program will allow our students to really take ownership of their own learning. They'll do this through developing their annual mission statements and their leadership binders. They will develop and monitor their progress towards their widely important goals. And they will host, the students will host, parent-teacher conferences that are led by the students to communicate to their parents and the teachers how their progress is going in attaining their goals. We believe that this is an aspect that's important because this is the shift in our educational system. It's not about how much we can teach our kids, it's how much our students can learn. Not just behind the classroom doors or walls, but also when they are on their own, constantly driving that need to learn and grow. We are looking at opening in the northeast corner of Polk County in the Davenport area. We do recognize, as we did last year, that this is an area of overcrowding. We feel that we would benefit from being in this area, and that this area would benefit from having our school there. We've had the pleasure of visiting some of the schools in this area. We spent an entire day with Ridgeview Global Studies Academy principal, Mr. Fryer, and he was absolutely amazing and extremely helpful. We visited other schools, including one of the McKeel campuses, and we met with Mr. Black. So it has been a pleasure so far to work and meet with some of the principals and educational experts here in Polk County. We will continue to work with the district to establish our relationship. I think we have demonstrated that tremendously in our recent interactions with the schools in the area, as well as the charter office, which has been extremely helpful and friendly to us. I don't want to take much more time because I am over my time, but I also wanted to have an opportunity to introduce to you two of our founding board members. I have Michael Pearson to my right. He is one of our board members, and we have Bart Arzeli here, also one of our board members. And with me today is Ivan Hernandez. Behind me, he works alongside with me, as well as Jeremy. Oh, there's Jeremy. So we are here to answer any questions that you may have regarding our endeavor.
Mr. Wilson?
Maybe I missed it. Where are you locating the school?
We're looking at the Davenport area, so in the northeast.
Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Sellers?
I was looking, you haven't picked a site yet exactly, just it will be in the northeast area?
Yes, there have been some sites that we've looked at, but we haven't gone into any major negotiations at this point.
Does the state require that, does the state not pay for any transportation outside of 4 miles? Because you noted that you were going to do the 2 to 4 mile, but that...
We understand that because of the area that we're looking at, we're probably going to have to transport beyond the 4 miles. And that has been, in past instances, when I've been a principal myself, it's something that I have done. But we do get reimbursed for up to 4 miles. So anything that we would do outside of 4 miles, it would most likely be out of our own pocket. And even the reimbursement that we get for the 2 to 4 mile range is still, it's not.
We understand, we understand that, well,
But you
I
know
just
what?
didn't know we had a limit. I mean, I know you can't do within the 2 miles, but we go beyond the 4 mile range, but charters cannot?
Well, I would have to research how it would be in Polk County. I know in other districts that I've worked at, we don't get reimbursed for beyond the 4. And
I must get that wrong.
Okay, Mr. Small?
Yeah, they get,
we do
it's anything above 2 miles.
anything above 2 miles.
There's not a limitation on how many
Right.
miles, you can go
Okay.
as many miles as you want.
Okay.
So my question would be, you
You're
would
not
be
gonna
willing?
reimbursed
Oh,
by-
absolutely,
Is that a
absolutely,
local policy?
absolutely.
A local policy?
We don't believe that, one of the beautiful things about a school of choice is that it is a choice. And a child, no matter where they live, should have the opportunity to attend a school of their choice.
And I noticed, I looked at your free and reduced lunch
Mhm.
because how are you going to ensure you will be diverse in getting some children that are on the free and reduced,
We
a diverse
actually,
population?
Mr. Fryer was very helpful with that. He said that he experienced something similar, and he went out into the Haynes community and the local areas, not necessarily directly around Ridgeview, and he went to the community centers, he spoke at the churches on Sundays, and really brought in families. He did kind of like a picnic thing, and he actually bussed families in for like a family event, and got them to see what the school is about. And that's kind of, I'm sorry?
We will be doing similar
And those are
events
the
like
kind
that
of
to
events.
ensure that we have the diversity.
Yeah, we want to do those events, it's just he gave us an idea of the platform in which we can easily facilitate that.
So you will be actively recruiting a diverse population?
You know, I believe that no school should be allowed to cherry pick their children. And I think I speak for the board when we say that. That is a philosophy that we all hold dear.
Thank you.
So your admission criteria will be a lottery, it's the first come, first served?
That it'll be a lottery, first come, first serve. If there are more applications than seats available, then we automatically go into a lottery. But an honest to goodness lottery, giving preferences to siblings, employees of children, board children.
Part 2 of that, or I'm going to ask this of all of them. Would you be willing to build in retention incentives to your contract?
What do you mean, I'm sorry?
Meaning we would penalize you or perhaps reward you if you keep 100% of your kids during a given year. Not, and that includes voluntary leaving. If a kid leaves and you have a turnover of X amount, what I'm trying to get at here is a stable population.
Oh, yes. I mean, I've been a principal, and I've seen what the instability of a school population can do to a school. It is detrimental to the faculty, it's detrimental to the students. It would be to our best interest to retain our population every single year. Actually, when I first opened up as an administrator, I opened up with 7 kindergartners, 7 sections of kindergartners. They're all graduating seniors this year. And the noticeable difference of those students being with us from year to year, it was a noticeable difference from any children coming in from the outside. So we would love to be able to retain our students, make
Well-
them family.
Well, but
Would we be able
take it a
to-
step further, put some sort of incentive language in the contract.
Yes, I feel
Okay.
pretty confident in what we have to offer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Wilson?
I'm going to go back to this, I'm sorry, but you have some idea, some sense of where you might be locating the Four Corners area?
Can I bring Jeremy up?
Sure.
He's a little bit of, he's more of the facilitators.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. It's going to be north, obviously, of I-4 on 27. There's a lot of opportunities there, but it's kind of sometimes the chicken and the egg. It's hard to get into a contract in some of these areas before you have a charter. So when we're dealing with different local realtors on different places, and
Are we thinking about the Champions Gate area somewhere?
have looked at Champions Gate, just the facility costs, the raw land costs we need to take into consideration. So
Could be north of there?
could be north of there. Yes, sir.
Probably.
You got a longitude, latitude.
Okay. So you did not apply as a high-performing charter?
No, we did not.
Okay, so your intent is to work with those students who may have special needs conditions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Navigate Academy? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a great work session.
Next, we have from representing Our Children's Prep, we have Dr. Andrea Callens here. She has some handouts and I'll just.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Callens, and I graduated from the University of South Florida with my bachelor's and master's in speech language pathology and my PhD in special education. For the last 5 years, I've been a regional director over rehabilitation departments in nursing homes and managed over 11 buildings across Florida and Alabama. Unfortunately, I suffered significant neck and back injuries in a car accident, which prevented me from returning to that line of work. So I applied to Our Children's of Winter Haven as the Director of Speech and Language Pathology and over Curriculum and Instruction. Unbeknownst to me, Sharon had a plan. And for those of you who are familiar with Our Children's Prep School, and you're wondering where Sharon is, she is retiring. And she has given me the vision for Our Children's Prep School for the sake of the children and the families. So I represent the future of Our Children's Prep School and not the past. Our targeted population will include 2.6% of Polk County's ESE population, not including gifted students. We plan to enroll children from 12 months old to 8th grade. Our year one projections include about 305 students. According to the Florida Department of Education, the Bureau of Exceptional Student Education, educational benefit refers to the extent to which children benefit from their educational experience. According to the 2017 LEA report, only 46% of Polk County's students with disabilities benefited from their educational experience. Only 47% of Polk County's students with disabilities graduated with the standard diploma, and only 32% of Polk County's students with disabilities matriculated into higher education or entered the workforce. In our effort to assist the Florida Department of Education and Polk County School Board to address the needs of students with disabilities, we have designed an academic model that is truly unique to our children. Our academic design will follow an educational and therapeutic model that will have the student at the center of all academic decisions. The uniqueness of our model includes the speech-language pathologist as the expert in language and literacy development and will co-teach with the ESE teacher in reading. Additional supports within the classroom will include occupational and physical therapists, the paraprofessionals, and the behavior techs. Our children's prep school will serve as an alternative placement for students in Polk County using a multi-dimensional system of supports where we will serve students who have progressed through the RTI process but continue to have significant deficits in academics, social and emotional learning, and continuous high magnitude aggression and behavioral disturbances. Our facility will be located centrally in Winter Haven, which has a 35-mile radius within the neighboring cities. The facility will be move-in ready and will not require any major renovations to the structure. Our projected student population will include about 40% white, 23% black, 33% Hispanic. Our disability categories will include autism, specific learning disabilities, speech and language impairments, other health impairments, emotional and behavioral disorders, Down syndrome, and developmentally delayed students. I've been married to my husband for 21 years, and we've built a thriving ministry in Plant City over the last 19 years. Just as we've been prudent over our ministry, I will take the same approach when managing our children's prep school. Efforts that will be made to maintain a collaborative relationship with Polk County School Board will include transparent, honest, and ongoing communication. I will have integrity, and I will show fiduciary responsibility with charter school funding. I will understand and adhere to the Florida Charter School statutes and to Florida's government and the Sunshine Law. This afternoon, I've included 4 letters of community support, 2 from parents and 2 from community leaders, for you to read and take into consideration during your review. This slide shows an overview of the governance and financial structure. The board, thank you.
You want to go ahead and finish your
Yeah,
last
you
thought?
finish yours.
Okay. So this slide shows our founding board members, and the board will establish a finance and audit committee, and monthly financials will be presented to the entire board. Financial reporting will be handled by an independent CPA firm and be precluded from performing any audit functions. All policies and procedures involving financial controls will be approved by the board. Thank you. Now open to questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, then Ms. Sellers.
You said that was the founding board, is that your current board?
Right now, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned the current, I guess, superintendent, Mrs. Tom College, is retiring
Yes, Sharon is retiring after this year.
at the end of the, what's that, June 2018?
Yes.
And I just have one other quick question. On page 2,
Uh-huh.
it says educational benefit refers to the extent to which children benefit from their educational experience.
Yes.
How is that measured? How do you measure that?
I'm not sure how they measure that. That report was extensive, and so I do need to go into further research regarding the educational experience. So I just don't know how they gathered that information. There were several different factors that they included, but to actually say specifically, I do not know.
No, I understand. But I am interested, if you wouldn't mind doing that research and sending that to me, I'd be interested in that.
Absolutely, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Ms. Sellers?
Is this address that's in the book the same one that where
Yes.
you're going to take over that building? Are you going to be leasing it, or are you going to be purchasing it?
We're gonna be leasing it. It's been purchased by Mike McCallick and Dominic Nicosa. So we'll be leasing it from them.
Okay, and they're not connected to the board or the
No,
school?
ma'am, they are no longer board members.
Okay,
I
they
think
were,
that was one of the issues last year, but Dominic and Mike are not part of the board this time.
okay. And they own the building and they're going to be leasing it?
Yes, ma'am.
to
They own the building
our
and we'll be leasing it from them.
And one other question, I just noticed in here that you said if unforeseen things come up, you've got loans from, or contracts or something with people that say they will loan you money. Do you have any way of paying that money back, or are there any terms? Because if you need more money and you borrow it, you have to have a way to pay it back. And I didn't see any, there were two individuals that were.
Yes, Brian Sherwin is one of those individuals. And so what will happen, all those of you who are familiar with Our Children's Prep School, some of you are aware that Our Children's Rehab Center is our partner when it comes to providing the therapist. So the reimbursement from Our Children's Rehab Center, if we make budget and if everything that we project comes through, the extra funding from Our Children's Rehab Center, that is the money that's going to be, that's how they're going to pay back. Not from Our Children's Prep School, but from Our Children's Rehab Center, our partner company.
Okay, that makes sense. I have visited the site. I'm impressed with the educational, the concerns last year were budgetary.
Yes, ma'am.
And so
So
while
this
the
year we
budget
had
looks better on
Curtis-
paper.
Yes, we have Curtis Fuller this year, and he worked diligently with us on the budget. So the budget is really tight, and we actually have extra funds left over based on the budget.
Well,
So-
I looked at the budget, and yes, it's in much better shape than the budget that was turned in last year. And the borrowing of the money, but you've got a way to pay it back.
Yes, ma'am, through Our Children's Rehab Center, not from Our Children's Prep School.
Okay, so if they loan the money, they expecting repayment from,
Our Children's Rehab Center, not Our Children's Prep School.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Townsend?
When you say you're targeting 2.6% of Polk County's ESE population, is that just a projection of what percentage lives in your target area? Is that just geographically based, or
It's
what's your-
geographically based and based on what we could accommodate.
Don't we have like 13,000
It's-
ESE kids?
It's 11,000, well, when we did the research, it was 11,677. So we based that number off of 11,677 students.
Somebody did the math for me like that.
That's about right, yeah.
Okay.
Excluding the gifted.
Which I clearly am not.
We'll have it.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Take it out.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Damian Moses to present Bach Academy North.
Good afternoon. I am Damian Moses, principal of Edward W. Bach Academy, and I come to you today to discuss the replication of a high-performing charter school by the name of Bach Academy North. Bach Academy North is a replication of Edward W. Bach Academy, in which in the year 1819, wanting to add just 6th grade, then the following year 7th, and the following year 8th, okay? 6th through 8th grades, it would actually serve the Lake Wales community, just as Edward W. Bach Academy does. And the targeted population is those Lake Wales students that are unable to get into Edward W. Bach Academy. We currently have a waiting list of over 450 students. The academic design, we're educating Renaissance thinkers for a digital age. It's going to be the exact replication. Okay. For a special guest, Dr. Jackson. Actually, the high scholastic achievement, the high incorporation of technology integration into everyday classrooms, of course, the architecture and design that Edward W. Bach Academy was based upon. The governance structure is the same, the replication of what Lake Wales Charter Schools is currently has, but also with this campus you would actually have only one principal, being myself. And so I would be over both campuses to make sure there's uniformity amongst both campuses as far as the quality instruction, also the leadership. Excuse me, the founding board members, of course, are the same board members as Lake Wales Charter Schools currently has. And if you look at our financial structure, we're site-based financial, so the principal is over each particular campus, so I would be over both campuses financially, but would be over the chief financial officer by the name of Brian Fisher, would be over the entire system as he currently is. Board of Trustees actually has the ultimate responsibility for all financial parts of the Lake Wales Charter Schools, and would be over Bach North as well. And then Dr. Jackson, the superintendent of Lake Wales Charter Schools, of course, would be over the both campuses, and myself.
Questions? Ms. Sellers?
Would the original Bach Academy and Bach Academy North look the same as far as diversity? I mean, are you going to fill Bach Academy, the original one, differently than you're going to fill Bach Academy North as far as diversity, academic achievement? Do you understand my question?
No,
How are you going to fill the two schools? Because you're going to get applications to both. I'm assuming
Right.
parents will be filling out for both. So,
It would be one application for actually both campuses.
and so therefore, that's my question. They would fill out an application. Are you going to fill the schools diversely, such as on a lottery system, so that one school doesn't have all the high-performing kids?
Yes, ma'am.
And you will, that is a plan.
Yes, ma'am.
I am concerned
So, can I add to what Damien just said? So,
yes,
okay, so our goal is to localize Bach North in terms of applicants. We'd rather have only Lake Wales students, if possible, to attend on that campus there, which would be different from how it is currently. And in fact, maintaining the same diversity that you're talking about in terms of ethnicity and academic ability and all of that, but really localizing the student population so that we can serve the 500 kids coming out of 5th grade from Lake Wales.
but the original Bach was supposed to do that. I mean, in the application, because I reread them, I think this summer, and Bach Academy, the original one, was supposed to have preference to Lake Wales kids, and I know there's quite a few kids coming from other areas. So they will look different, because then I'm assuming Lake Wales, the original Bach Academy, will continue to pull kids from other areas, and the Bach Academy North will only take Lake Wales kids? How are you going to do one lottery? I mean,
Well, the original Bach application did not say, it's a broad in terms of student population. It did say designated for Lake Wales.
you said give preference to Lake Wales, I
Give
read
preference,
it.
right. But
And-
preference doesn't mean what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about right now is we want to make it exclusive Lake Wales for the North Campus.
Oh, sorry.
And the other thing, I'm real concerned that you said the students will have to maintain a 2.5 grade point average. It's on page 14. And I believe that's against the law now. Charter schools can't dismiss kids for low academics, I believe.
That's correct.
So that statement in here is very troubling to me, because this is how you become high performing. You dismiss all low performing kids. And I'm very
Is that a
upset about
statement
that.
or is that a?
That is, I believe the law has corrected that, because we have said, while you hold us accountable to look like charters and brag on charters, charters can become high performing if they get rid of all their low performing kids and this statement says academically students will have to maintain a 2.5 grade point average to remain in good standing, and that sounds like you're going to dismiss
We
them.
haven't released any students on academic performance.
Then it's troubling that it's in here in the application, because I think the law now has done away with that. I'm just concerned about
Yes,
it,
ma'am.
because all children are precious.
True.
And charter schools should work with every child that wants to go, just like we work with
Right.
our children.
And the same with magnet schools.
Oh, absolutely. If you know my philosophy on what magnet schools should do, you would understand.
But I'm not
it.
talking about philosophy, I'm talking about the reality.
The reality, and I'm fighting for that reality.
Right.
If you
Right.
would know who I'm about. We need to keep our kids, and every kid is precious and deserves.
Yes, ma'am.
And I
So
don't
I'm
think-
concerned with that in here.
We don't have any, I don't think we dismiss kids
Not
because of
academically.
academics.
Okay.
Mr. Townsend?
The language
It
needs to be
yes.
corrected,
Yeah.
updated.
What's the specific mechanism by which you're going to localize it? I mean, what will it will be kids who don't live in X zip code are not admitted? What's the mechanism?
Well, that's sort of a challenge, because the way that some things have been rezoned, the kids coming in to Lake Wales from down Thompson's Nursery Road that
Some of your Chain of Lake students.
that were not really originally a part of that zone, that attend McLaughlin, for instance, which we don't know exactly why that happened, but we're wanting kids that actually live in Lake Wales, not Thompson Nursery Road.
So, I mean, are you gonna put some sort of city limit language in it? I mean, that's just what I'm asking.
Yeah.
How practically are you gonna do it?
Practically, if we could only accept kids from the 5 elementary schools in Lake Wales, that would be the most expedient way to do that. That live
The
in
5,
Lake
okay.
Wales. Right.
Can,
The 4 charter, the
Can they?
1 non-charter. Correct.
I mean, yeah, can they? I mean, that doesn't seem like it would be an if. I mean, if, no. Okay, I mean,
Basically,
they can.
like
They
that.
can.
One last follow-up, Sarah, please. It is my understanding in the past that Bach has asked for a waiver of the FERPA rules, so that as part of the application process. To my knowledge, no other charter school does that. Do you guys envision continuing doing that, or are you going to stop that?
That's sort of tricky. And I say that's tricky because, I'll give an example. We have a recognition where we recognize students from charter or non-charter schools in Lake Wales as Lake Wales scholars. We don't want to know anything about the students, but whether they meet the criteria. We've been told that because of FERPA, they can't release a student's name that meet the criteria to us so that we can recognize them for that, for at least for the McLaughlin school. Schuylkill comes. So, but they say it's because of FERPA, why they don't release those kids to us to get recognized. I know that when you're doing your admissions, there's been some conversation about, you know, I don't know if it's because of grade point averages or because of some issue related to what you're trying to do to
Right.
bring your kids in there that,
Well, the process has been updated based on the law. The sellers has been changed, and we actually worked with Ms. Brady's group with her department, along with Attorney Tully, to get those things rectified. So that has been changed.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like kind of a yes or no question. As I understand it, in the past, a FERPA waiver was conditional to be able to apply. Is that the case now? Will that be the case moving ahead? And that's pretty much all I'm asking.
No, what happened, originally they had a Target 1, Target 2 student on the original charter. And once the law was passed, then we actually worked directly with Ms. Brady and her group to actually change that so we're in line with the state law.
Okay, so if a parent gets the application, it's not going to say waive this right to apply.
Can I comment? There's still a Target 1 group. Target 1, and it states it must be college-bound, family of college-bound attendance.
Right, we couldn't use any academic, we used no, Ms. Brady didn't use any academic, just attendance and one other criteria.
That's not what I'm asking.
I know what
So,
you're asking.
No,
You're asking based on attendance,
No,
discipline,
I'm asking
grade point?
as I understand, you have to waive
we're not
X,
asking
right?
for a waiver.
You're not waiving, okay,
No.
that's done.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Ms. Sellers?
I do have a question, because the Target 1 and Target 2 is still in here. When your original application came in for Bach, I interpreted the Target 1 and Target 2, or these are two groups, you're going to be targeting both groups. I realized then that you said, no, Target 1 is going to be the kids we're really going to go after, and if we have any space, we'll target 2. It's still in this, and I interpret that as against the law, that you can't target kids with high academics over kids with low academics, and it's still in this Bach Academy 2, the Academy North. You've still got Target 1 and Target 2. My interpretation the first time around was those were two groups you were going to target. You would target both groups and then do the lottery, because there was a statement after the Target 1 and Target 2 that preference would be given to all Lake Wales students. So I interpreted it just that you were going to target both groups and then do a lottery. I understand later that you actually were pulling all Target 1 kids first, and of course there was no ever space for any Target 2 kids. And
No, we have.
well, I've seen the data. Listen, I pulled the data and I was just shocked because, anyway, but then it was explained to me how you did it. But I'm very concerned that that Target 1, Target 2 language is still in
Okay.
Bach Academy North's,
Yes.
along with that grade point
Yes, ma'am.
average. Once again, because I'm not against charters.
Right.
I just want all children
All
to be
children, yes, ma'am.
treated with respect. And I know that the Lake Wales Charter, they want all kids to succeed. But there are some kids with more challenges and more needs, and we have to be just as dedicated to those children as we are the self-motivated
Yes, ma'am.
children. So
you should
that's a
come out and
concern.
visit, you would see those kids.
Ms. Reynolds? Ms. Reynolds, then Mr. Wilson.
I just wanted to comment, you said, getting the kids from the Lake Wales elementary schools. Do you have a process to ensure that those students are from Lake Wales? Because I know several families that are not from Lake Wales that are attending those elementary schools, so if that's the way to.
We have the same process that anybody would have, we use
Address.
zip codes.
Okay, so if but as far as making Bach North for more targeting Lake Wales students, if they're just coming from the elementary schools, I just wanted to make that, those students are also from the Winter Haven and other surrounding areas that is a little concerning.
But what was concerning to us is you got kids coming from Thompson Nursery Road that really is not Lake Wales, that are part of a school, McLaughlin. And McLaughlin is a community-based school. And so how is that? Do you understand what I'm saying? That just a rhetorical question almost. You have kids coming in from outside of town to attend a local school, and you're questioning us about kids that actually are attending.
My question is
local
because
schools.
you've said that you want it to be a Lake Wales school.
Right.
And so if you
Right.
want it to be a Lake
But
Wales
what I said
school.
was zip codes for us would be the most expedient way to determine whether the kid actually lived in Lake Wales. And we want the kids, you see, what our concern is that we have kids on waiting lists that we can't enroll into the school because we don't have space for them. Because McLaughlin didn't convert to charter school. So our hope is, working with McLaughlin now, that between McLaughlin and Lake Wales, we can serve the kids that live in Lake Wales, which is, I've said that several times now. And you asked the question, well, how would we determine that? I said zip codes. And you said, well, what about the kids who attend the elementary schools that live outside of town? I'm talking about the kids who live in Lake Wales that have zip codes for Lake Wales.
So from those schools targeting with zip codes. Okay. That was my question.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, as you know, that, Lake Wales is my district, and I'm a huge fan of Lake Wales charter school system. I guess my concern is that we hear from the community, we hear from the board that you want to serve all the kids like Wales, and I believe that's true. But that's not consistent, I think, with your application. So I would hope we could kind of clean up some of that language a little bit and make sure everybody's on the same page with that. And I would offer this. I think, in my opinion, it's just my thoughts, I think the best approach is to accept the kids from the Lake Wales school system first. So all those kids in the elementary schools from Lake Wales, take them first. And you know, we have school choice now by state law. So there could be some kids from Lake Wales who choose not to go there.
Right.
So if you took the kids, I think, from the Lake Wales schools, I would suggest that would be the best approach, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and that really is how it works anyway, practically, because if you think about the first Bach Academy, we accepted every child in Lake Wales that wanted to attend the school. We still had vacancies or openings. And when you establish a budget for a school, guess what you have to have in order to manage that budget? You have to have students. And so then from that original population, we open it up to people outside of Lake Wales. That's the only reason why we have people in Bach right now that were not a part of the community, because the initial entry and the people that were interested in Bach, they weren't sure about whether Bach was going to make it or not, because it was a brand new school 10 years ago. Nobody knew exactly how that was all going to work out. But I can tell you what, within a couple of years, there were people locally there that were saying, wait a minute, you got these folks from out of town that's attending, you know, our school. I wish they had sort of signed up at the very beginning, but it didn't work out that way. And so in this case, what you're saying is absolutely right, Lynn, that the people that are enrolled in the Lake Wales schools should get first dibs at that. But guess what would happen if, let's suppose that, okay, we have X number of spaces, and those spaces are not all filled because people make choices as to what school they're going to attend. Some people choose to go to a private school, even though they live right next door to a school. What do? Do we say, well, you know, we'll just not enroll? Well, we have to meet budgets and things like any other school. And so if we have, in a choice environment, if we have vacancies that need to be filled, if a person applies for that, and we've filled up with the people that we want to fill it up with, and no one else locally wants to attend that school, what will we do? Not enroll students that want to come into the school? You can't do that yourself.
No, and I don't think anyone's suggesting
Right.
that. I think it's just making sure that the kids. from Lake
Absolutely,
Wales have-
very much so, and I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I thought it started at 1:10, and that's why I came in. Sorry about that.
Next up, I have Mr. Anthony Graham. Grant and Dr. Victor Hall. They are representatives of the Grant Career and Tech Educational Center, vocational high school.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Grant. I have my bachelor's degree in career and technical education, my first master's in career and technical education from the University of South Florida. I have my second master's degree in education and leadership from the University of West Florida, currently working on my doctorate. And this is a strong passion of us and the community that I currently live in. With me is Dr. Hall. He is the vice president of the board for GCTE. And let me just start off. Meeting the needs for what GCTE is basically doing. We personally feel that all students, regardless of their race, religion, they require education. And we would like to provide them with the best education possible. One of the key things that I noticed, I moved down here in 2007, was that they took career and technical education out of high schools. And a lot of career and technical education programs that I grew up with and I love and I enjoy, I want to implement that back into the community. These students basically, in the east side of Polk County, that's the target population that we are looking to house GCTE. There's a big demand for it. The population is growing on the east side of Polk County, and the schools that's basically there is starting to get overpopulated. And we would like to be that pressure relief in reference to offering these students a school choice or alternative way of learning. Our goal for GCT is to improve and support the quality of education within the Polk County. GCTE's fully intent is to work with and comply with the Polk County School Board and Florida Department of Education's policies and procedures to ensure that both of the county and the student is met in reference to their educational curriculum. Our main focus and our philosophy is basically focused on career and technical education, providing them workforce-ready applications, skills, and certifications. So once they get out of high school, they'll be able to migrate into the community. We also focus on our STEM, in reference to the careers and technical education that we're going to provide for these students, or offer these students. They will be able to align with the new wave of STEM learning. Not every student, like myself, when I left high school, I wasn't college ready. I went to the military, Marine Corps, and then I went to vocational training, got my architectural drafting. A lot of students are not college ready or college bound, but if they can leave high school with craft skills and trade skills, they'll be more successful to succeed in society or into the workforce, moving right into the workforce. Another reason why that we were focused on starting on the east side of Polk County is that we give parents more of the choice, school choice for the parents. Giving them also a means that they can save money in reference to providing their child with a skill once they get out of high school. Our target demographics is basically we're looking to help all students, all races, ESE students, IEP students, ELL students, Our staff is going to be certified and equipped to handle all the different special needs and the needs and demands for that community. Evidence that support our school. Basically, we're an active member of the Chamber of Commerce out in Haines City. We currently spoke to the city manager of Haines City. We also work diligently with the Heart of Florida in reference to having community backing. Several of these individuals, basically, you know, we spoke to them in our community chamber meetings, and they see that there is a need in that community, and we can be able to help and benefit them, you know, and the community and the students of that community. Our board, our founding board, basically are members of that community. Like Betsy Cleveland. Betsy Cleveland is the president of the Haines City Chamber. She's part of our founding board. Also, we have individuals like Dr. Hall. That's part of our, you know, part of the living in Polk County. Basically, 90% of our board is basically from Polk County. We got a few in the surrounding areas and Point Siena. So they live and breathe and they see the need of the school and what we have to offer in that community.
Thank you. Ms. Sellers?
My understanding, you didn't really clarify it in that speech, you are really looking for kids that are being unsuccessful. This was, in trying to read this was my understanding. I likened it to New Beginnings High School. Are you familiar with that charter
Yes,
school? That's been very successful, and it's not in the Haines City area, so I didn't see a conflict.
We are looking for kids that's not successful, who are successful, who are ambitious, who have aspirations for receiving career and technical education. So we'll take them all. Our background, most of our background comes from corrections, comes from alternative schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of our structure and our foundation is from. But we're not just specifically just looking directly just for those at-risk kids. We open for all.
Okay, but then I looked at your structure for your teachers, so I'm assuming that a lot of this will be structured though online, because I only saw 4 academic teachers and 2 vocational teachers.
Yes, ma'am.
So
It's very similar to setup, just like how New Beginnings is, and also how New Directions is, and other different charter schools, you know, throughout our surrounding counties and stuff.
So it will be set up that way,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
New Beginnings is very successful, and they have not had trouble with funding because of doing part online. We've had other charter or companies that had trouble with the funding model, but you are run more like New Beginnings,
Yes, ma'am.
and so that won't be a problem. I'm only going to correct one thing. I'm very proud of our career and technical programs
Oh, yes.
in our
Phenomenal.
high school. We are not taking away. We have more career and vocational technical programs than were ever in schools, even in my day. So while in many areas that may be true, once again, I really don't see it a conflict, but please don't convey that Polk County has, because Polk County is, in my opinion, a shining star on offering career and technical programs.
I concur. I was just speaking in general. My kids went to Polk County School District, and I love the fact of the career, but I wanted them to get more. My son got his welding certification. I wish he was able to learn that in school. It would save me a lot of money.
Yeah, so, but we're talking about Polk County here,
Yes.
and when you announce that, it makes people think
I
we're not doing it.
apologize. I
And
didn't mean it.
we are on the cutting edge
Yes.
of this nation in doing our career and technical. But you, while you're going to be open to everybody, it is going to look like a New Beginnings as far as you'll have 4 academic teachers, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
But you'll be offering a lot online because you were offering many more academic courses as I read through here.
Yes, ma'am.
And you will be targeting that kind of population also.
Also, yes, ma'am.
And where is it going to be in Haines City?
As of right now, we're in strong negotiation contracts with the old Social Security building off of Haines Street in the Haines City Plaza. In the Haines City Plaza, they have roughly 24,000 square foot section. Yeah, it's humongous. Section that they're looking to contract with us upon approval.
For all of it or part of it?
For all.
For all of it?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're
Purchase
going to
to own,
serve
lease to own.
200 students, did I?
Yes, ma'am.
Your target's 200
Our
students?
first year target is 200 students. Max is going to be up to 400.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, I'm a big fan of vocational school. And I think we could use one in that area. But I did have one concern, and I think it goes to what Mrs. Sellers was talking about. It appears that your administrative costs are roughly the same as your instructional costs. And I'm not, is that typical? And that may be a question for our folks. Is that typical for a startup or typical for this type of school?
Basically, the history that I opened up several charter schools. We try to put it in a way that the playing field is even. You said the administrative costs.
Your administrative costs in your budget appear to be roughly equivalent to your instructional costs, and it seems a little heavy on the administrative side. I don't know.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. The administratives are basically kind of like for the first year when you're doing double duties. As the population of the enrollment grows, we're able to spread out that administration into the instructional and director's positions over the teachers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any others? Okay, thank you.
Just one last thing, if you all have one of these in your folder, that's just for your own information, that's our timeline for review of the applications. The approval, the superintendent will bring recommendations to the board on October 10th, and then on October the 24th is when we'll actually vote on the charter applications.
You want to take a quick 10-minute break while we transition to
Sure.
Wendy?
Sure. Well, I thought we were going to do Mr. Townsend's item.
That's Wendy.
Yes, that's Wendy.
Oh.
Can we do my part of that first before the other ones, like she's got other policies?
Right, that's what she's bringing, that item first.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna take a quick 10-minute break, so 1:45.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I was trying to wait a few more minutes for Wes, and we now have our board chair with us, so we started the agenda. We actually flipped item 6 up, so we're on item 6 now. We're gonna start from 6. So Wendy's gonna come and present item 6.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am here today to facilitate the discussion on relationship notification, that I guess is the only way that I know how to describe it. Up on the screen and in folders, I believe, that you've been provided.
Just hand out.
Pass out
Just hand out.
documents,
Mhm.
okay. This is our current appointment policy, and what you have on the hard copy is just the nepotism portion, which is at the end of that policy. It's a rather long policy, so instead of printing pages and pages, I saved a tree and just did the end part, which is nepotism. So this is current policy, which talks about you can't directly supervise a relative, defines relative as what we think of as relatives, but it also includes any person who resides in the same residence as the supervisor. And then additionally, you have our current sexual harassment policy, and again, it's a lengthy policy, so what I provided to you are just the portions that define sexual harassment. and I've highlighted just the language that is probably pertaining, what I thought would pertain to this discussion. In addition, the board chair had asked that I pass out an additional policy that is Lakeland Police Department's nepotism policy, because it's local and in place, and it might be something we wish to refer to as we go on with this discussion.
So I think at this time, Wendy, you're opening up for discussion among the board members. Okay.
Should I kick that off? Because
Go right ahead. Mr. Townsend. you're
No, I mean,
recognized.
I think this speaks for itself. I don't think that people who are in relationships or who find themselves together in the course of working should supervise each other. I think that's fairly common sense. I'm pretty open to how we deal with it. I think the Bay County school policy is pretty good. It's pretty direct. The one thing I would maybe add to it is if a supervisor and a non-supervisory person are working to get together and they find that they're attracted to one another and one thing leads to another, I don't think that we should fire them both, there should be some obligation to prompt disclosure if something like that happens. But it's, the Bay County thing has prohibited relationships. I'm not trying to prohibit anyone's relationship per se. I am trying to, if you find that you're in a relationship with someone you supervise, you should bring that very quickly to your supervisor's point of view. That might be the one thing I would add, a way to make it a little less punitive for something that happens in the course of working together. Does that make sense? Or I'll just sort of turn over to anybody else, see what they think.
Ms. Sullivan?
I would say it's odd. I like Bay County because, to me, the simpler and more direct, the easier, the more wordy in complication,
Right.
the more you can get confused. And I also thought, well, these things happen, but there should be, if you think you're attracted, I was thinking along the same lines, you need to self-report and somebody needs to agree to move. And we should try to accommodate that, because in this system where we're short people, a lot of times you can move. That would, or have language before, if somebody needs to try to move out of the situation before it becomes a problem. And that would be the responsibility of the person, and that's the only other language. If you find yourself attracted to somebody, somebody needs to, and our organization is big enough that you could probably move. But that's sort of your response. I was thinking it would be your responsibility as an employee to say, gee, I might like to date this person, but I need to then ask to be transferred or find another job within the system, which a large system like this, it's fairly easy to do. And I just think that's the responsibility of the person to do that. And I would think that we would if they self-reported or one person said, I think I need to move because I might be interested, that we would help facilitate that.
Yeah,
But there's a line.
you just might put that as a number 3 on the 1, 2, and 3. Sorry, I'm sorry, Ms. Scott.
Can I put, you saying the self-report part is number 3? Part of the responsibility?
On duty to report, it's got 2 specific scenarios. I think what Ms. Sellers is saying, and what I would agree with, is add a 3 that says, if you find yourself at the same site and there's an attraction and or you hook up, I mean, I don't know how else to say this, but if you promptly disclose that, then you're not punished. We're going to work with you. The problem is the ongoing aspect to it. The prohibited relationships aspect of the Bay County is the only thing that gives me any pause to it, because it doesn't create an incentive to report if you
No
fine.
penalty for disclosure.
Right. I don't want this to be punitive. I want this to set an expectation that people are open and behave like adults.
I saw Ms. Fields, then Mr. Wilson.
I guess my question would be, how does this relate to current employees who might be an administrator and the ex-wife or whatever is working at the same school that they're at? How would that be handled? And how would that be handled in the future if an administrator were to want to hire his ex-wife or ex-husband, whatever?
I guess we have a discussion, so Mr. Townsend.
Is that not currently considered under the nepotism policy? That's not, okay.
Currently, that is allowed. We do have some instances of where an administrator is employed and their ex-spouse is currently at that school. So that would have a direct impact on the number of earnings.
Just proof of thought, Mr. Wilson, I guess.
Well, and let me be abundantly clear, I'm all for this. I think that it creates all kinds of challenges when you have folks in romantic relationships and one supervising the other. I don't know how you get around the punitive part of it. I mean, that's, you can have a policy that says here's what our expectations are, but what are the consequences if you don't follow it? I think you have to put that in there. Right? But here are a couple questions I have. They're just questions. That's all they are. What if we have individuals who are in a romantic relationship who are already married, for example? They have no incentive whatsoever to report that to anyone, and I think that's where we run into some problems. Or, for example, you have two individuals who may be involved in a relationship and they don't want to report it because they may fear that they will be discriminated against. Let's say, for example, they're of the same sex. And what kind of challenges does that create then when it becomes public? It could even be some legal issues. I don't know. So I'm all for it. I'm just saying that we have to be very careful how we craft it to consider those situations that could occur that could put us in a potential legal situation. And the other issue, excuse me, just one, it has to do with what if neither of the employees wants to leave? Who has to move? Is it the subordinate or the supervisor? I mean, I think you kind of have to define those things because you will run into them eventually. I don't know how we do that, but we should work towards that end.
Ms. Sellers.
They might not, if you're going to have a relationship with a supervisor, somebody needs to move. And if they don't want to report it, somebody needs to move immediately, because as soon as it's found out, they would be breaking the policy. This is adult behavior. If a supervisor, and I mean, you can have, because they'll know we have a strict policy. You can't supervise somebody you're having a relationship with. So if you're going to indulge in those relationships, somebody has to move. You can immediately report it and move, or you can hopefully move before anybody finds out. But that's, and the consequences were put here. You're at risk of losing your job. You move because you cannot, I mean, I understand it's not fair to anybody. The rest of the employees may not appreciate that. So we're adults. The adults know that you cannot supervise somebody you're in a relationship with, no matter what the situation is. The logical thing to do would be one person has to move. Whether they move and not report, and then probably nothing would happen if one immediately asks for a transfer or moves, or they report it and say, one of us needs to move. That's the cost of having a relationship with somebody you're either supervising or is supervising you. And I think from looking at this, it's legal. And I would ask the lawyer, is this a legal expectation that we can have?
It is certainly a legal expectation that you can have. You can define parameters that say a supervisor should not be in a relationship of whatever description with someone they supervise. Yeah, I think you run into practical problems of individual privacy and freedom of association when you try to maintain databases of that information. But you can certainly so arrange affairs that both parties would be responsible for reporting that they would not be eligible to work in a particular position. Should only come up in the event that the superintendent recommends an individual for an employment, and it turns out that that individual is related to someone either that they would be supervising or be supervised by, and at that time, it would become an issue, and somebody would need to alert the superintendent that if she were to do that, it would result in a violation of that policy.
Ms. Fields?
So Wes, I have a question. You weren't
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
room. I said, how does this apply to administrators who currently are supervising their ex? And then the other question that I have is new, is how does this apply, if we approve this policy, how does this apply to current situations? If there is an administrator who's currently dating someone or is in a relationship with someone at their school, does this immediately become effective and they have to remove themselves? Somebody has to remove themselves and report?
I think that it depends on how you craft the policy, but it certainly could. It certainly could, if that situation exists.
And the same thing for the ex and the administrator?
That would depend on how you wrote the policy. I would respectfully suggest that it starts getting tricky at that point, because there may be all sorts of issues that arise out of that for them individually, as well as for the district as an employer. And so I think we would have to look very carefully at that. It's also something where the people making employment decisions have the opportunity to use some judgment. But I think, we could certainly craft something that read in such a way that not necessarily that every individual needs to report every relationship they've ever had, but if the superintendent taps you on the shoulder and says, I would like for you to go work in Defuniak High School, and you know that you have an ex that would be in your supervisory chain, at that point, it would logically, you would disclose that and say, this could be a problem for us because. But I think the policies that we've seen seem to have in common that the reporting requirement comes when the assignment is proposed. Does that make sense?
So, Ms. Wilson?
Well, I would offer this. I think this policy has a better chance of being successful if there is one individual to whom the person reports, and that is strictly confidential. So that if you have a situation where someone is tapped on the shoulder, they can go to somebody else, let's say, for example, our director of human resources, and say, look, I have a problem, this is my problem, and then a solution could be worked out that would be completely private.
Yeah, difficulty is in structuring that.
Yes, I know.
Because we have people moving around the district, you report it to one, that person moves, and what happens now? The difficulty that I foresee is that ultimately, if this was to be done in a systematic way, it would require the creation of a database, to use, for want of a better word, to show who's reported what, that would be accessible to people making human resources decisions. There is no exemption to the Sunshine Law that would allow that information to be held private. If it's held private in the brain of a supervisor somewhere, that's all well and good until that supervisor moves on and you have the next supervisor. It's a thorny issue.
Mr. Townsend?
No, and I totally agree with that, and I think we'd be crazy to create a database of relationships, I mean, the question becomes not what's the perfect policy, what's an improvement on what we have now. I think creating the expectation that our folks recognize, all of us, that it's not appropriate for us to be in relationships with people we're supervising is an important thing to do. I also think adding the little number 3, where if you find yourself in one of those relationships, it's not necessarily a death knell to yourself. In fact, it's not at all if you promptly disclose. You know, and I think probably the best thing to do is someone either designated in HR or we designate it as the immediate supervisor, and it's done in a verbal way. I mean, in an oral way, I guess, and so there's no record created, and then we just go from there.
Mr. Wilson?
And I agree, I like that idea, and I think it should be human resources. I hate to put more work on our human resource department, but my concern is this: sometimes things happen. We don't intend them to happen, they happen, and the last thing I think we want to do as a school district is for that to become public knowledge somehow, whether someone lets it slip, and then you ruin lives and families and things like that. So that would be my preference, if there's someone that they could go to and it would be confidential and they could come to supervise. This isn't going to work. Can we move them somewhere else, or not at all? Perhaps maybe you don't promote them. Maybe they just say, you know, I can't accept this position, and if you've got something for me somewhere else, I'd like to do that.
One other possibility that might be considered is if you have individuals applying for positions, you have an opportunity for them to disclose. You ask the question on the application for the position. Are you related to or have you had a relationship with anyone at that site?
Well, I'm not.
Or we could say, wait, no, but you could say, are you eligible under all policies for this role? And if you say no, then you can explain to someone. You don't have to say, because I mean you don't have to ask the question.
Sure, and you could include in the application language that specifically says it is the policy of the school board of Polk County that people who are related by blood, marriage, or relationship may not be in supervised roles, and you know, put it in the form itself.
So just for clarification, we do currently ask you to disclose any familiar relationship that you do have with any employee at Polk County Public Schools.
Is that
where the location is.
Does that go beyond blood or marriage?
No.
Yeah.
And I guess one other thing to respond to Ms. Fields, I guess in an ideal world, Billy Townsend would prefer that people we've had past relationships with, whether they be ex-wives or husbands or exes, that we not supervise them. But I'm not going to insist on that for this. I would much rather get something if we can, if that has to go to get this through, I'll drop that. So I see where the complications of that come in. My preference would be no, but I'm willing to sacrifice that preference.
Yeah, because it would be very difficult to police.
Right, and it probably puts the balance too intrusive. Yeah. Right.
So, are you clear?
It is clear as mud, the direction that we would like to go. So what I'm hearing is you want to start with the Bay County policy, add a number 3 under duty to report that talks about if you're at the same site and you disclose, there's no punishment involved.
Right, it's like a get out of jail free card, you know, if you disclose it promptly.
You have to make sure that you say currently.
I'm sorry, currently.
If you currently, are you talking about what I was speaking of?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to talk about what the added number 3 under duty to report.
No penalty for
So
disclosure.
currently, if you're at the same site,
But it's a supervisor-employee thing.
Yes.
Right?
Right,
Yes,
what my number 3 was, if you're a principal and an assistant principal, and you're working closely together, one thing leads to another.
Right.
I don't want that to destroy both of your careers.
Right.
If you promptly disclose that, we can work with that. That's why that's why I said get out of jail free.
So supervisor subordinate role is what you're addressing.
And prompt can be a month, you know, I mean, if we have to set a time.
Can I make a suggestion? Can I call the director of Bay County Public Schools, the HR director, and see practically how they implement this policy? I have a number of questions about this, not necessarily that I'm for it or against it, but just implementing in my brain. I'm questioning that, so I need to figure out exactly what they do, and then maybe I can bring it back up to the next work session to massage through that with everyone, so that we're all clear as to how this will roll out, when it does, and the impact that it will have on all of our employees.
Completely agree. Yeah, completely agree.
Mr. Wilson?
You know, I'm a process person, and we tend to drive people crazy, but to the extent that you get the process right up front, it solves a lot of problems in the back end.
Exactly.
Well, and I think this very discussion expresses the board's intent, I hope. I mean, would, to move forward on this, and I mean, can we express that intent, and then we get the implementation correct? I mean, is that pending?
No, I think today was for the discussion and then for us to see how we work through it because we're talking all of our employees.
No, agreed. Okay,
Wendy?
Okay, so we'll bring it back?
Yes.
Okay, then do you want to move to the?
Yes, your policies while you're there, and then we'll come back.
So then the next item was proposed policy updates. There were several benefits policies that just added language about a privacy information officer. And there was a web content policy, criminal background check, that was just a statutory change. And probably the only one that's new is that crowdfunding policy. That has become necessary because we have a great deal of that going on, sort of unregulated, I think is. And so we wanted to, superintendent had recommended saying yes, as long as it's a pre-approved. And so that's what that policy says. And then based on the board's direction, we'll bring back related policies regarding fundraising and get into the details of what happens when that happens.
Good.
Question? Mr. Townsend?
What might be a concrete circumstance of that? Like if a school crowdfunds buying a playground or something?
So the situations we've been having are where there's crowdfunding going on using the district's name, saying it's for a specific classroom, and then when things come, when things are purchased or donated to the school, it's unclear to the person who got it in the first place that that's the school's property and not their property.
Perhaps I could pitch in. There's also the potential issue that the only contracting authority delegated to principals, generally speaking, is that comes from the internal accounts handbook. And there are very limited circumstances under which a principal is authorized to enter into a contract in the name of the school board. That would be for yearbooks and caps and gowns and class rings and things like that. Where you run into a difficulty is if there's a crowdfunding project and somebody at the school enters into a contract that purports to bind the school board of Polk County without authority. So we have to be careful of that as well.
Okay.
You can crowdfund all you want to. If you're doing something that is official school board business, the authority to enter into contracts lies with the superintendent and her designees.
So are there any other questions?
And just so you'll know, that was a topic of conversation at the Florida School Board Attorneys meeting last week. It is not an issue unique to Polk County.
And I think that's why Neola has recommended this as a new policy, as well as recommendations to changes to other policies, depending on what happens with this policy. Okay,
Okay,
all right, thank you.
okay, thank you, Wendy. Now we have John and Angelo is going to talk to us about the donation to Ponciana
Okay.
school site.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah.
This item is before you today to seek direction from you to see if we should accept a 15.29 acre parcel from Avatar Properties for a school site. They're planning to convey it in lieu of impact fees. We got an appraisal on the site. It came up to $520,000. That equates to about $34,000 an acre. And it's in the Poinciana area. And even though the schools in that area are not overutilized as yet, based on approved development and projected enrollment, we will probably need a school site there in the future. It is 15.29 acres, so it's not that large. But if the board agrees that we should proceed with this, it'll be on your regular September board agenda.
Any questions, Cunningham?
Just a comment, I reviewed that and it looks like a wonderful opportunity for us, particularly because we're swapping tracks. So when since we already had development in that area or had that land already purchased, looking at the proximity to one another, it's still in the area in Village 7 there where a lot of that growth is actually occurring and we are going to need a new facility. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that, and I think we'll be able to utilize that property here in the near future as we look at, new schools being built in the greater Poinciana area. So it's wonderful that they've been willing to work with us in order to make this happen. So it's a win-win for Avatar and it's a win-win for the Polk County School Board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sellers?
Have we done the math with what the impact fees, how many houses this include? I mean, do we know what area, because Avatar owns lots of land. Is it all of their land that they own?
No, it's based on an impact fee of about $5,200 per unit. It'll be like 120 or 130 units. In this area, they have 121 approved in this area, but they have developments all over. So they'll be able to get impact fee credit up to that $520,000, which is the appraised value for the 15.29. Beyond that, they will have to pay their impact fees.
Ms. Sellers?
People aren't going to, there's people that have already built and paid impact fees. There's not going to be an issue with people complaining that once that is met, because the impact fees will be on individual houses. So some people won't have to pay impact fees at all, and then others will as soon as this this threshold's met, then the next house has to pay the full impact fee. I don't want to cause an issue of people complaining and saying it's not fair that I have to pay an impact fee because this house was
So
exempt.
can I clarify? It's on the developer, Avatar Properties, what they own. The private individual property owner will have to pay his or her impact fee. It's a developer, Avatar, giving us this 15.29 acres. And in lieu of payment, they're asking for impact fee credit, totaling $520,000. So the individual property owner who owns his property right out will pay impact fee. Avatar bringing through his
So all the houses will be paying it?
impact fees.
Okay, all right, that's,
Yes.
Okay.
and one last question. Is this
29 acres.
15.29 acres, is it enough? Or, because I know our other schools, we're landlocked, and do we have a plan so that's a small acreage? Are we better off taking the land than taking the impact fees and being able to buy a larger piece of land? That would be a facilities issue, not mine. I just
Right.
want to be sure we've thought of everything.
And we have thought about that, and we have done the analysis. A 15.29 can certainly accommodate an elementary school. If we were to buy that property, it would be like $1 million to $2 million. So to get it for $520,000 impact fee credit is a benefit to the school district.
Those are the kinds of things.
Okay.
Any other, Mr. Wilson?
I guess I'm still a little bit confused. Is this a swap for land we already have, or is it them giving us land in exchange for impact fee credits?
It's the latter. When the development was approved, the plan development is quite old. It was a development of regional impact. The school designation, land use designation was on parcel S. It was on track S. This is to change it to parcels M and N. And in addition to just change it to M and N, we worked with the developer to convey it to us, for the possibility of conveying it to us in lieu of impact fee credit.
Okay, so the swap is not a swap on our part, it's a swap of land on their part.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I feel like this is a good deal.
It's a good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think
Thank you.
we may be able to, if we needed a different piece of land over there, this is something that we would have the ability to trade,
To use still.
to use for that as well.
And attorney, Sean is here, and he has been working with us on the agreement. Sean Porter.
Yay, Sean. Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you. So items 7, 8, and 9 were all informational items, with 7 being a grant. I'm sorry, 7 and 8 being both, being the grants for Juanita and Gibbons on 8, and then you have the grant Laurel, Palmetto, and Lake Marion on 7 that we received, those 2 grants recently. Item 9, I believe, Dr. H, you might want to address that, because we did get a concern on item 9, which is the Uniform Statewide Assessment Calendar. We want to provide this to you so that you're able to see. We've removed a lot of those assessments away from the previous year, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to answer questions, which we did get a concern about writing. So
Yes,
you want to
ma'am.
address the writing? Okay.
The formative assessment piece that we have in place for writing is for grades 4 through 10th grade. This is not new. This is something that we've had in place. I think it's something that we should still consider. When you consider that when we're looking at students and their progression within learning, the writing skills is obviously an important part of that. So when we consider that and pair that with the fact that part of the FSA ELA score is a writing score, this is right in line with that. So basically, each quarter, we would give a writing prompt, the student would respond to it, and then the teachers actually get together and score them and use that to plan the next unit of instruction with that. It's very much a formative assessment, and I believe it's the right thing to do to continue to do that. I know there was maybe a question about the cost of it, and to do it 3 times, considering that we print off the prompt and provide the materials for the schools. It's about $10,000, but it saves the schools from having to do the printing, is what the deal is. So it'll be just a little bit north of $10,000, probably around $12,000 to do it this year. That would be my best estimate at this point. But I do think it's the right thing to do. We've tried to pare down everything that we could that wasn't directly related to moving student achievement and useful to a teacher in a class, but this one is one that I think we need to continue to do.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, good. Okay.
I've had several conversations with this parent about different issues. I think it's a legitimate question that we need to be able to answer each time. Is this something that's needed? Are we sure that it's going to drive instruction? And always have really good discussions with her about it, but I do agree with this, is what we need to keep.
Who chooses the prompts, just out of curiosity? Is it part of the package?
No, curriculum instruction, they work together with teachers and look at each grade, what's appropriate, and they rotate them back and forth. So it just depends on the grade and how it aligns with state standards.
So it's
Teachers are involved with it.
So it's generated here?
It is.
Yes.
All right.
But scored at the school level, literally the teachers get together and coaches get together and they score them together.
And it's handwritten?
Yes, yes. Some of them are worked on the test on the line. It just depends on whether it's a computer-based assessment.
And can I ask one other thing? What is the FAIR test? Help me with that.
It's the Florida Reading Readiness Test. If you'll remember, last year when we went into the assessment season, we actually purchased a STAR Early Literacy, and we call it still the Flickers of the Fair by state standards, but STAR is what we use. And we actually got ahead of the state on that, and so now they're actually saying statewide you can use this. But when you see fair or you see Flickers, it is for us the STAR early literacy.
Okay, so is it just the same, like, is that an additional thing on top of? Like, so are we taking fair and STAR, or is fair just absorbed into STAR?
We don't, we take the STAR.
I think she knows back there, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, sorry.
We take the STAR.
Okay,
Early literacy.
so where it has fair, we're not actually taking that, we're taking STAR instead?
Early literacy piece, yes, sir.
And the Flickers one as well. All right, okay, that's good. So that's two more we could scratch off.
It is, there's a little bit of ambiguity between the STAR early literacy for the one administration with kindergarten.
Okay.
And that's the initial one where we have to actually assess kindergarten readiness. And then we get our students, our kindergarten students, actually within our program started. Our goal is during August to actually give the kindergarten what they're calling the Flickers piece of it. And then end of August, 1st of September, we would actually administer the early literacy piece for our kindergartens to start them on the progress monitoring as we move forward. Making sure we're very transparent on that piece. A little bit of ambiguity there.
Okay. Question?
Just for clarification on the parent email that we received, if it is being graded by the teachers at the school level, that 14 to 28 day turnaround period is based for getting the scores back for the writing exam. She was concerned about how long it would be from writing it to, so that can, okay. So it would be no different than a writing prompt that they assign to their class, that turnaround time.
Yeah, but sometimes they do like to get together, and like I said, sometimes they have district coaches come out, and it's worked on together.
Okay, thank you.
Here's another question. She wanted to know, why are we conducting multiple formal writing assessments in grades 4 through 10? Are these additional district, not state mandated assessments necessary?
Yes, ma'am. And as I mentioned before, Ms. Fields, I do believe they are necessary. The formative piece of writing, where we're progress monitoring, the students and the teachers work together. And the teachers actually are using that piece to actually guide the next unit of instruction. And I think that when you're looking at literacy as the total unit of literacy, writing is one component that we need to ensure that we're working on together. And we actually have them periodically spaced. It's about once a quarter that they work on together. So it is, I believe it is a necessary assessment to move instruction forward.
So, Ms. Jackie, is Dr. Ace going to respond back to this email, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Wilson?
I have another matter that's unrelated, so whenever we're done.
Oh. That's it? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Dr. Ace. Okay. That's it for, Mr. Wilson, you have a question? I was going to turn it back over to the chair.
Well, before we talk about the review, before we review the agenda, I did have another thing I'd like to bring up related to policy, or possible policy change. Would this be an appropriate time to do that, Madam Chair?
Yes, that's fine.
So, when we agreed to the LGBTQ proclamation, one of the things that Mr. Townsend offered was that it was all very positive. Nevertheless, there were a lot of folks in our community who were offended by our actions, and it seems like we have a responsibility to try to be as equitable as we possibly can to all of our constituents. You know, in my lifetime, I've never heard a prayer that didn't offer positive things, and yet there are folks who are vehemently opposed to prayer. I don't believe that our Constitution talks about separation of church and state. Certainly, we understand that we own our government, telling us what faith we should have. But I don't think that translates to anything at the school board level. And I don't believe that federal or state law prohibits a prayer before a board meeting. Yet there are folks who are, as I said, are terribly offended by that. So we have tried to do something equitable with our prayers, as we know as a board. We've attempted to do that. I'm not a fan of proclamations. I think that we run a very real risk of dividing us and dividing our community and creating situations that are unrelated to education. So what I would like to offer is this. If my colleagues believe that we should continue with the proclamations, I would suggest that we adopt the policy of the Board of County Commissioners. Their policy does not endorse any proclamation, does not endorse proclamations, they don't vote on them. They don't affix the commissioners' names to them, and they don't sign them. They simply read them and present them so that there is no endorsement. So I would like to offer that we consider that policy, adopting their policy for proclamations moving forward.
I would like to see what other districts do, what other school districts do. Or maybe Mr. Bridges can find out what other districts do.
That I can do.
I have no particular objection to that. I mean, see how it plays out, but.
So,
I also would like only proclamations that really, why are we doing, even presenting controversial proclamations? Proclamations that have to do with positive education of our kids and support of our kids. Most of our proclamations relate to that, but that, because I can see this opening the door to, if we're not voting on them and we just present every proclamation that comes to us, that it could get strange. You know, right now, it's all of those unintended consequences that we do, but we're in the business of educating kids. I really think our proclamations should have to do with our children and education and supporting those organizations that are specifically to do with education of our kids. Because while we can't even imagine, there could be some strange proclamations that we're reading, and because we're not voting on them, I just don't want to have some unintended consequences of reading every proclamation and not having any discrimination. They just be brought, and because we don't vote on them, if they're brought, we read them. You can only imagine this world sometimes seems to have turned upside down, and so I have no problem with that, but I also want only proclamations that deal with our kids and education.
Mr. Wilson.
Well, I agree. I think the challenge we have is how do we define that? Because I suspect that everybody who brings a proclamation will tie it to education. And I think that it's going to be, and then we're forced to vote. And once you're forced to vote, I think that's where it becomes divisive. I suspect that there will be no one that will come to us and say, hey, this proclamation doesn't relate to education, but I want you to offer it anyway. They're going to tie it to education, and then we're forced to vote on it, which I think is where, that's exactly why I'm suggesting the policy I suggest.
Why don't in that case, we retain a mechanism for voting one down? If the default is we don't vote, but they come before the thing, and we can trigger a vote if we want to. If somehow the Ku Klux Klan comes and says, hey, we're an educational organization, we want you to, then we have the ability to vote against it. I mean, we don't have to vote on its face. The default position is no vote, but we have the right to turn it down. I mean, to me, that seems the way to kind of split the difference on what you're talking about.
So I guess I see your hand, Mr. Sullivan. I have a question here. So when the proclamations come to the school district, who filters it to the school board meetings? Is that the superintendent? Who does it? The communications department?
Ultimately, it is, nothing comes to the board but by the superintendent.
Okay, all right.
But I think the practice in recent past anyway, has been that they come through community relations, and they arrange to make sure that everything's on a nice form and looks official and dignified, and then presents it to the school board.
It's usually been the ones that they do normally each year.
And
that's what they've been presenting.
And I take Mr. Townsend's point, and might suggest that that if there is to be a so-called filter to this, it might be wise for that to take place before it comes to the school board, rather than putting the school board in the position of having to vote on something that is going to be obviously divisive. Especially given the example that Mr. Townsend gave. I would like very much for such a thing not to come to the school board and not to put you in a position of having to discuss it and vote on it. And I think there are ways of doing that.
Okay, well, then that's something that maybe you can work on. Again, I don't have a problem with not voting, but I think it'd be nice to know what other school districts do and
Yes,
what do
ma'am.
they have in place. What is their procedure?
We will lay hands on that for you.
I think Ms. Sellers and then Ms. Reynolds, I think can handle that. And then Ms. Cunningham, was yours up?
Mr. Wilson's was out.
All right, Ms. Sellers?
And I was going to say something very similar, that if we had a policy about this, that we reserve the right to decide if it's educationally sound and positive for, that not us, but the superintendent, somebody be able to say, no, this isn't in line with our mission and vision of our school, and however legally we could do that. But it was the same as Mr. Bridges.
Mine was also the same as Mr. Nick.
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
I like that idea. So, I think that if we adopted, I'm just going to make my case here a little bit more. If we adopted the policy of the Board of County Commissioners, then all of the board members would have been on board in the last item that we addressed. So I think it helps there. But I would agree, having a filter before it comes to us is important, and then maybe even a second filter once it comes here. If it's certain board members feel like it's not appropriate, we can have a voice in that and agree to vote on it, for example. But I think to the extent that we can not insert ourselves, between our various communities, and stay focused on education, it behooves us to do so.
All right, is there anything else? The only thing that I would want to have comments on before we go to the agenda is just to let everyone know that the poll that was done by Ms. Susan concerning the Master Board training, the consensus is October the 11th. It was between the 11th and the 13th, so the date is October the 11th. And the meeting that we had planned with the Board of County Commissioners has been postponed, and I guess they'll let us know when they're going to try to reschedule that meeting.
Madam Chair, is that a 3-day training then, the 11th through the 13th, or
It's
just the 11th?
a one-day training.
Just the 11th. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. All right, I think that's all that I had. And so now we'll start with the agenda for today's meeting. And we have one special recognition. I'm not aware of any speakers. Do we have any speakers to address any item on the agenda? I don't think so.
No, I don't have an agenda.
Okay, all right. And we have 3 sets of minutes, and we do have, one new administrator, I believe.
No, we have 4.
4? Okay, so we've added?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So then we start with the consent agenda, C10 through C11. Business services, grant application, C12 through C17. Business service contract, C18 through C28. Ms. Sellers?
On the, I think it's C23, the lease renewal, it's a 3-year renewal. Is there a reason, because we've had it for a long time, so is there a reason we couldn't do an annual renewal versus a 3-year?
It is right now. We did have it changed to 1 year, because they wanted, the original contract was for 3, and we went back because of the cost of it, looking at just an annual, having it at 1 year.
Oh, so this...
It was changed.
Oh, okay, I see. I misread. Okay, thank you.
Does that take care of your question?
Yes, yes.
All right, business services donation cash, C29 through C43. Purchasing items for teaching and learning, C44 through C47. One, Human Resources, C48 to C50. Human Resources Services Annual Items, C51, and then C52, C53 through C54, and then C55, C56. And then going to the regular agenda, we have nomination and reappointment to the Sales Tax Oversight Committee. Yes.
Can I ask, Susan, did you get my nominees on that, or they just not on the? That
It'll be on the next.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't screwed anything up.
All right, hour 58 through hour 61, hour 62. And then we have a public hearing to adopt the policy updates, the policy changes. And then we have the superintendent's report, and then we have the proposed 7069 litigation. You all had discussion about that earlier?
No, ma'am. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take just a moment on that. There is no draft complaint yet, and after discussion with the districts that have already engaged, it appears that will not be circulated until they're ready to file. However, I'm in a position to tell you that so far, Broward, Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, St. Lucie, Lee, Bay, Volusia, and Hamilton counties have joined. Orange County will be voting tonight. I have, in the memo I provided to you, I gave you the dollars that each district has committed thus far to the initial effort. My suggestion to you is going to be, if you choose to do this, to make an initial contribution of up to $25,000 for that purpose. I can tell you that at the school board attorneys meeting on Saturday, I was advised that the counties that have already joined the litigation have made a selection of counsel, and the lead counsel for this action will be a gentleman by the name of John Borkowski. I've known Mr. Borkowski for many years through the National School Boards Association Council of School Attorneys. He is a partner. He used to be with Hogan Lovell, and you'll remember that name because your friend Maurice Sneed is a partner there. He is now a partner with Hush Blackwell, which is a national firm. They have offices in Austin, Chattanooga, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Houston, Jefferson City, Kansas City, Lincoln, Madison, Milwaukee, Omaha, Phoenix, Springfield, St. Louis, Washington, D.C., and Waukesha County, Wisconsin. You will note that one thing all of those offices have in common. Hands? They're not in Florida. That is correct. This is a national firm, and the decision was made to retain counsel from a national firm that has no political ties or obligations to the state of Florida, so that they will not be conflicted in any way in bringing the action. I was advised that at this point it does not appear that they are addressing the single subject issue. You'll recall from our last conversation, one of the concerns that had been raised was that you had a 200-page statute that deals with all sorts of things, and you've got a constitutional requirement that bills have a single subject. The problem with bringing that litigation, or bringing that action on a single subject, as we discussed, was that there may be things in that bill that you don't want to go away, and if you attack it on single subject successfully, the whole thing goes away and we're back to square one. So the discussion was that the action will be brought, essentially the cause of action is to say we believe that the Constitution of the state of Florida endows local district school boards with the right to and the responsibility to control, manage, and direct all public schools within their district, and that this is a legislative attempt to erode that authority. Mr. Borkowski suggested that this is litigation that may very well have a national implication because it is a larger policy issue. Florida has one of the stronger constitutional provisions making education a paramount right. Other states are watching that. You know, we watch things happen in California and then flush right across the country. But this is one where the potential is that this will have policy implications nationwide because there's always competition for resources. There's always a what Glenn Reynolds used to refer to as a dynamic tension between people in government at the state level and people in government at the local level, especially when the one controls the funding to the other. So it is a big deal. It is important. They have retained a huge name in the field of education law to do this. Hush Blackwell, as I mentioned, is a national recognized firm. In anybody's book, it would be a heavyweight. But the beautiful thing about retaining Mr. Borkowski is he can approach this objectively without any obligation to anyone in the legislative or executive branch of Florida government. So we'll bring it to you this evening, and if you are prepared to authorize that litigation, you may do so at that time. And what I would suggest to you is that you authorize the superintendent and myself, and I thought about it afterwards, also the board chair in case a signature is required to execute any documents that are necessary to join that litigation, if you choose to do so, and also authorize the expenditure. I would suggest 25 since it's in line with other districts our size. If you have a different amount in mind, I'll certainly take that to them. Once again, this may not represent the entire cost of the litigation, but it will get the ball rolling and get us through the trial level.
I think that we should really do this. For us that have been on the board a long time, we've watched over the years our constitutional rights be eroded, and this time it was a real heavy dealt hand. I would say that we want to work with our legislators, though. If they want to fix these issues, then we won't have to go to court, because court takes some time, but we have to take a stand at some point and be serious about our local rights. It's real personal with me, because even in our hometown, we've had to move teachers that the community is very upset about, because the state is dictating to us what we as a community should know better, how to run our schools. So I thank you for doing all the research on this, and while I'm a person that would hate litigation more than anybody, it's time, and with the hopes that our legislative body can rectify some of these constitutional errors, I believe, because they've overstepped their bounds, not just this time, but many times.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, again, I'm a process person, I don't want to drive people crazy, but, so after you deliver your report, it would be appropriate for someone to make the motion for
Yes, sir.
this school district to join in that lawsuit.
Yes, the language was the request to authorize the superintendent general counsel to execute all necessary documents in connection with such lawsuit and the expenditure of up to $25,000 toward the total cost of litigation.
Where is that? Because it's not in the motion.
It is in the memorandum that I provided to the school board. Should be attached to your agenda.
I don't see that, but if we can get a copy of that.
I'm not able to
Yes,
open it.
Okay, we'll provide hard copies.
I think everybody's in agreement, I believe.
And if in the interim, the legislature takes action to correct things that the various party school boards have issues with, you can always withdraw if we reach that point. And Miami-Dade and Orange County have both had that in their conversation, that they intend to communicate with the legislature, and if they fix things to their satisfaction, then the litigation, they can withdraw. And if it satisfies everyone, then the litigation could go away. But in the meantime, that there will come a drop dead date. We don't know what it is yet, but there will come a time when this thing is filed, and it will be difficult for anybody else to join, because every time somebody would join, we'd have to go back to square one procedurally. So there will come a time when the group of districts that have decided to do it is finite. That day is not today, and as I mentioned, Polk County and Orange County are both voting today. But as I said, some of the heavy hitters have already committed: Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Volusia, Lee, lots of districts with lots of students. So it's, the ball is rolling. Yes, ma'am.
Do we anticipate anyone else from the Central Florida School Boards Coalition besides Felicia and possibly Warren?
I don't know. I don't know at this point. There are a lot of people involved in the conversation. There are a few districts who have declined to participate. My understanding is that that has to do in some instances with actions pending before the State Board of Education and their desire to avoid retaliation.
All right,
I'm
thank
certain
you.
Pascal won't be joining.
I think you have direction.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll bring that to you off the attorney's report.
All right. The last item is that we have our annual internal audit services audit plan for 2017-2018 that Carol will bring before us for a vote. And then that's it. And we're done. And Ms. Jackie wanted to announce that we have an executive session scheduled at 3:30 in the Legal Services Conference Room.
It's brief.
3?
Brief.
Oh,
Brief.
brief. Okay, brief. Okay, 3:30 conference room.
40 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's it.